So now we're going to go into our chi-squared table, and we're actually going to look up what the critical value is for our examples. In both of the examples that we had, they were both 2 by 2 tables. And so that means each one had 1 degree of freedom. So this is going to be a really easy thing to look up. Okay? So let's go and look. All right, so here's the table. All right, so up here at the top we have the significance levels. And remember, we're going to stick with 0.05. All right, and then over here on the left side, we have the degrees of freedom. And you can see right there's 1 degree of freedom right there at the top. That's the one that we're going to use here in this particular case. And so we just go across where those two meet, and there's the critical value of chi-square that we have to beat with our table in order for it to be significant. Okay? And that number is 3.841. Okay? So the critical value with 1 degree of freedom equals 3.841. Okay? Now, if you go back to the examples we did, the first example with the cheaters, where we were trying to see if there was a relationship between the men and the women and cheating, we ended up with a calculated value of chi-square of 12.7. All right? And so now we simply need to ask ourselves a simple question. Okay? Is that bigger than the critical value of chi-square or not? And the answer is yes, it is. 12.7 is in fact bigger than 3.841. And so we conclude in this test that we do think there's a relationship between gender and cheating. Okay? So we reject the null hypothesis, and we accept the notion that there actually is a relationship between these variables. We're concluding that the observed values that we see differ from the expected values more than would happen just by random chance. That's what we're concluding. Okay? All right, the second example that we did, we came out with a much lower value of chi-square. That one was 0.23. So there were much smaller differences between our observed values and our expected values in that table. And so we had a much lower chi-square calculation. So again, we have to ask ourselves the same question though. Is this thing bigger than the critical value of 3.841? And the answer is no in this case. And so in that class, we would conclude that there is not a relationship between gender and cheating. We would fail to reject the null hypothesis. We would say the differences that we see between the observed and the expected values are so low that we think they happen just by random chance, and they're not really indicative of a real relationship between those variables. And that's all there is to it.